Legend says a queen slept above a trapdoor, one pull, and a lover vanished into the dark. Records suggest the story travelled faster than truth. Another queen crossed the channel with an army to hunt her husband. In London, power changed hands while a rumour about a red-hot poker burned for centuries. A young widow followed a coffin across Castile by candlelight, then a door closed behind her for 46 years. In the forests near early Kyiv, a feast became a reckoning. Chronicles recount birds carrying fire beneath the eaves. And in Rome, whispers forged a poison ring for Lucrezia, yet in Ferrara, ledgers show a woman running a court, not a cabal. 5 scandals, 2 versions of each, the rumour and the record. Tonight we open the first door. Naples, after midnight. Silk rustles, water stirs below stone. If you listen closely, you can hear the hinge. We have arrived at the bed that made a legend, and at the edge of a queen's reputation. If the tale is believed, her name becomes a curse. If not, she keeps her crown intact. That is the wager in the dark. Is it true? A maid whispers in the corridor. Lower your voice, another replies. Walls remember. A chamberlain drags a stool across the flagstones. You heard nothing, he says, not unkindly. Candles tremble anyway. The story blooms like mould in the cool air, a velvet coverlet, a hidden lever, a gasp, the shock of water far below. No blood is described, none is needed. The mind supplies what the mouth will not, but records suggest a different beginning to the night. A clerk in the treasury counts coins by touch, murmuring sums the city can neither afford nor ignore. He notes arrears, dowries, ship levies, the price of grain. Outside, surf slaps the quay. Inside, Naples measures itself against the scale of a queen. 4 marriages, says an ambassador from the north, warming his hands over a brazier. 4? That many? 4, the notary answers. By 1376, the books mention them all. Books can lie. Books can be audited. The notary turns a page. Ink glints like wet on tile. In the margin, someone has doodled a miniature door. No one writes down the leverage of a myth. That travels by breath. She keeps a trap under the bed, a sailor tells a tavern. A hatch to the moat, the tavern tells a merchant. A swift judgment, the merchant tells a visiting friar, who frowns as if the rumour were a stain spreading through linen. Say it again, the maid whispers, braver now. Don't beg a story for mercy, the other says. It never gives any. In the royal chamber, drapes mutter against each other. The queen, young and sharp-boned in the lamplight, watches the flame thin, then thicken. She is not permitted to be merely tired. Monarchs are either radiant or doomed. Between those 2 lanterns, she chooses a third light, deliberate. Majesty, says a steward at the threshold, the night accounts. Leave them. Shall I send for counsel? Let counsel sleep. I will read. He bows, but hesitates. They speak strangely in the streets. They always do. Not like this. Like what then? Like people who have seen something. People often see what they are told to see. The door closes softly. The room inhales. She reads. The numbers are steady, impersonal, colder than any rumour. Taxes arriving late from Apulia. A vessel seized by pirates near Capri. A wedding that has to be bought like a harvest in a lean year. 4 marriages, alliances forged like chainmail against the blows of neighbours. Accounts vary on how much choice she had in the forging. The point is that the mail is worn, and the blows still come. Your Grace, says a voice from the canopy, half joke, half warning. Speak plainly, she answers. Plainly? The voice drops. Doors have ears. Then let them learn discretion. He steps from shadow into softer shadow, a courtier who knows where light falls when it wants to be seen. They say the bed kills. Beds are less ambitious than people. They say a lever hangs beneath the mattress. Levers belong to harbour cranes. They say a man disappeared. Many men disappear, she says, and it is not cruel. It is arithmetic. He waits. His silence is a rope offered. How far will it travel, she asks. As far as envy can carry it. And what buys envy shoes? Debt, he says. Disappointment. A queen who refuses to be the rumor they wrote. She smiles like someone testing steel. Then we will outwalk it. Majesty, enough. Her hand lifts. The gesture closes the hinge on the conversation. Bring me the map at dawn. A messenger runs the length of the colonnade, breath fogs, then breaks apart. He bangs the butt of a halberd on the stones and is admitted to a side room where 3 men argue over nothing they will sign. Say it, one mutters. Say it, another repeats. He says it. About the hatch, about the water, about the lover none of them liked. The men are quiet, then loud, then tired. One pinches his nose as if holding back a sneeze or an opinion. We need her to remarry, someone says finally. She already did. Again. Then find a house that wants the crown, says the eldest, and a priest who wants a promotion. He lifts his cup. It tastes of church wine and compromise. Breather. Behind these doors, nothing explodes. Voices are measured, pens scratch. The city sleeps like a ship in a slow swell, rising and falling on conjecture. If there is danger, it wears slippers, not boots. Down by the water, a fisherman ties a new knot his father taught him. 2 turns, then tuck, he mutters. He pulls, the rope snugs. A hatch might be built that way. Turns and tucks, a trick of balance, a practiced hand. He laughs at himself. He has never seen the palace bed. But the mind is generous with architecture. In the palace, the queen lays the accounts aside and opens another book. It is thinner, meaner. Anonymous hands assembled it out of spite. Her supposed cruelties, appetites, failures of mercy, triumphs of vanity. None are dated. All are confident. She reads them the way a physician touches a bruise, curious about where the pain blooms, more curious about what heals. Majesty, says the steward again from the doorway, a letter. From whom? From a cousin who is not a cousin. An envoy, then. An invoice shaped like a greeting. She breaks wax. Offers, threats, a suggestion masquerading as advice. Bind Naples to a husband strong enough to quiet the piers and the alleys. The letter does not speak of love. It speaks in measurements, dowry weights, troop counts, the width of a moat at the narrowest place. She writes one line in the margin. A rumor promises speed. Law promises distance. Then she adds the only thing that makes aphorisms worth ink, an example. She writes of a merchant house that took a whisper, sold it across 2 ports, and extracted a lower tariff by morning. Outcome, the tariff stuck for a year. Majesty, the courtier tries again, softer. You could deny it. Denying a story is like chasing smoke, she says. You end up smelling of it. Then replace it. With what? A better story. She thinks of the door in the margin, of the lever no one has ever seen, of the water that everyone can hear when they want to. Replace it, he said. Replace it with what? Dawn, she says. Maps. Maps will not cure gossip. Maps win afternoons, she says. Gossip only wins breakfast. He almost smiles. You plan to survive till lunch? Longer? She says. It is useful to schedule survival. He bows and leaves. The latch clicks, a metal syllable. By morning, Naples will trade the night's hatch for day's errands. Market carts will squeal. A friar will decide to preach against bedroom architecture. An envoy will decide to overcharge. And somewhere a scribe will add a line that survives long after this bed is dust. That by 1343 a young woman was crowned Queen of Naples, that her reign would run toward 1382, and that 4 marriages would be counted in the ledgers that measure public life. The trapdoor. Accounts vary, legends travel light, records travel in caravans, both arrive eventually. What they do, when they get here, depends on who opens the door. Tomorrow we do not chase a rumor under the mattress. We walk into daylight, toward a council table where maps and marriages decide who falls and who remains. Naples, early spring. The council chamber lit by a pale shorelight. A chart of Italian coasts lies unfurled, weights holding corners, ink drying in rivers and arrows. On the table sit two choices dressed as courtesies: a marriage contract from a northern house with soldiers to spare, and a letter from a prince who promises ships if his name is printed beside hers. If she picks wrong, neighbors circle. If she signs nothing, grain stalls in the bay and creditors grow teeth. The bedtime rumor will survive either way. The city might not. Read the clauses, she says. The northern house wants ports, the notary replies. 2 for 20 years. Too long. They offer infantry. How many? Records list 1,000 on retainer, reinforcements if paid. The steward touches the second letter. The prince sends galleys. How many galleys? She asks. 8 this spring, 4 next. The figure lands. 8 hulls mean convoys move under banners instead of prayers. Ledgers show shipwrights humming when paid. Markets settle when ships arrive. Price? She asks. A wedding, the steward says. In Milan. His confessor will speak first. His confessor speaks for Rome, the courtier murmurs. Rome always speaks first, she says. We decide what answers. A messenger arrives, boots wet with harbour spray. He lays a sealed strip of vellum on the map. Wax breaks. Ash from the brazier lifts and spirals. The script is curt, the courtesy salted. If Naples chooses the wrong spouse, a loan expires. If Naples refuses both, a blessing becomes a reprimand. Beyond the window, gulls quarrel like jurists. Tell me what the street believes, she says. They believe the bed eats men, the courtier says. They believe creditors will eat us, the notary adds. And you? She asks. I believe the bed is a story, the courtier says, but stories buy votes. Votes don't pay sailors, the notary says. Coin does. She walks the edge of the map with 2 fingers, touching promontories as if they were bruises. This city lives by water, she says. A rumour travels on breath, a fleet travels on oak. An aphorism, the courtier teases. Then add its proof, she replies. When galleys escorted last year's wheat, thefts fell by half. Outcome: fewer broken locks on warehouses, fewer knives in alleys, a quieter winter ledger. The papal legate enters with ceremonial pauses, every fold of cloth an argument. Majesty, he says, bowing precisely, our Holy Father desires your stability. Stability is expensive, she says. He suggests a marriage that pleases both heaven and trade. God's signature sells well, the courtier whispers. She pretends not to hear. Name the consideration, she says. A dowry adjusted, the legate answers. A clerical appointment expedited, and a sermon clarifying certain unhelpful stories. The bed, the notary mutters. The legate folds his hands. Our pulpits are not broadsheets, but we can caution the imagination. Caution is not silence, she says. It has to be enough, he says gently. Public hunger is a fire, which burns fastest when grain is stuck in harbour, the notary says. The legate inclines his head, then unstick it. She could ask for more gold. She could ask for fewer sermons against the sins rumoured to live under her sheets. Instead, she asks for dates. When? She says. Pentecost, he replies. Too late. Ascension, then. Feast days, travel, she says. Coin must move now. He blinks. Now. Now. He adjusts his ring, counting to a number his office approves. Then Easter, he says at last. She nods once. Easter. The chamber shifts around that word. Plans learn their calendar. A clerk starts a column of figures. A captain sketches hulls. The legate sets down a smaller, meaner request, a name he once promoted, a rival he once relocated. Politics loves receipts. Breather. Outside, spring unpacks itself. Laundry surrenders to sunlight. Someone forgets to gossip for the length of a song. For 3 breaths the city feels possible. Write the prince, she says. Easter. 8 galleys under Naples' colours for 2 years. An oath before witnesses, not whispers. 2 years only? The notary asks. 2 is an argument we can win again, she says. And the northern house? We will dine with them, she says. Food civilizes disappointment. A servant sets wine. She does not drink. The room smells of beeswax, old salt, and the arithmetic of survival. Majesty, the courtier says, softer, if you marry again, some will say fear chose for you. Let them, she says. Fear is useful when it keeps ships moving. Then admit it, he says. Admit you are afraid. I am practical, she says. Practicality is fear with receipts. The notary smiles despite himself. Receipts we can file. They assemble conditions like carpenters. The papal legate wants a chapel endowed. She wants a bishop who reads contracts. The prince wants precedence in parades. She wants precedence in the harbour. The northern house wants a portrait. She wants a convoy schedule she can touch. A captain enters smelling of tar. If we have 8 galleys by Easter, he says, we can convoy 3 grain runs before summer storms. 3, she repeats. What does that do? It cuts prices, the notary says. It blunts hoarders. By how much? 5 to 10%, he answers, if no one lights fear for profit. She looks to the legate. I can ask for quiet, he says. I cannot buy it. Buy it with work, she says. Announce a fast that feeds the poor with confiscated surpluses. A fast, he says, surprised. That will offend men who hoard. It will save children, she says. Another aphorism, the courtier murmurs. Add its proof, she says again. Last winter's bread tithe cut deaths on the waterfront. Outcome, 12 fewer shrouds stitched by the guild, a figure no rumour had the patience to count. Afternoon leans in. She signs the letter with a deliberate hand. The script says nothing about beds. It speaks of timbers, crews, and dates that anchor promises. The legate affixes seal to parchment. Wax chills into obedience. Majesty, the notary says, some will call this surrender. Call it oxygen, she says. You argue better after you breathe. The messenger runs for the harbour again, a smear of red cloak along the colonnade. A captain whistles at the news. Riveters strike metal, caulkers bend, oarsmen grin like men who know when pay arrives. On the quay, a fishwife tells a different story than she told last week. This one has numbers. At Vespers, the rumour still walks. It always will. But it limps now, outpaced by timetables and the sound of mallets. Power is louder than gossip only when it keeps a beat. Night returns, soft-footed. She allows herself a thin slice of fruit and a longer look at the map. A courier kneels for instructions. She sends him not to a bed, not to a priest, but to a shipyard where answers are made of planks. Will you wear white? The courtier asks, almost playful. I will wear a ledger, she says. It is not romantic. It is stable. He tilts his head. Stability seduces badly. Stability feeds everyone, she says. Seduction feeds itself. He cannot argue with bread. By week's end, the first hulls are counted. 8 pledged, 2 under repair, 1 still in argument. Even the city's cynics respect a row of numbers tallied in public. The rumour settles into a corner, starved of oxygen by schedules. Will it die? The steward asks. No, she says, stories do not die. They molt. And what does this one become? An anecdote men use to explain a woman they never negotiated with. She closes the ledger. The day has been made into something that can be carried forward, like a sum, like a pledge. Somewhere a bell rings for compline. Somewhere a priest finds a gentler word than the one he rehearsed. Across the water, another queen studies a different map. She will not bargain for galleys. She will bring them. Flanders coast, Late summer 1326. Wind gnaws the canvas, ropes creak, and a narrow harbour fills with men who have decided that tomorrow belongs to the bold. Stakes arrive with the tide. If she fails, she is a traitor who crossed a sea to wound her own crown. If she succeeds, a kingdom sheds a skin. Somewhere between those fates stands Isabella, hair pinned like armour, eyes reading the weather as if it were a treaty. "Count the hulls," she says. 12 hired, Mortimer answers. More if Hainaut grows generous. How many men? Under 2,000, he says. Estimates vary. Enough if England remembers its anger. England remembers what it is told to remember, she says. A Hainaut captain taps his tally board. Coin first, he says. You'll have it, Isabella replies. And banners. Whose banners, he asks. Mine until the channel is behind us, she says. After that, the prince's. The boy stands a half-pace back, more symbol than soldier for now. Mother, he whispers, are we truly invading my father? We are rescuing a crown from his keepers, she answers. Say it that way and do not flinch. He swallows. I won't. Speak louder, Mortimer says gently. Soldiers hear confidence or they hear doom. I won't flinch, the boy repeats. Isabella nods. Good. A spray of gulls tilts like tossed paper above the masts. Sailors drag crates. A priest offers a blessing sharpened to suit mercenaries. The plan has been boiled down to schedules and substitutes. They will land where the coast forgets to watch. Where marshes swallow hoofprints and gossip needs a day to find its legs. Chroniclers will later debate whether the moniker She-Wolf of France came before or after this morning. Either way, she lets the name do its work in the minds of men who would rather follow a legend than a petition. Last chance to return to court, Mortimer says, not quite joking. Court returned to me the day it exiled me, she says. Then we go, he says. They go. Oars bite water. A narrow wake unspools behind the lead galley. A sword drawn very slowly. The boy stands at the prow and pretends he isn't cold. Isabella watches a line of foam decide the horizon. The channel can be many things. Today it is a contract, cross, and become what the crossing demands. They make landfall under a sky rubbed thin by wind. Men wade, boots slurping mud, pennons cracking. A farmer's dog barks as if announcing a pageant the village did not order. Which town first? Mortimer asks. Any with a gallows? She says. Let them see we change who stands on it. A reeve arrives with a face like an old coin. Name yourselves, he demands. Friends of law, Isabella says. Law travels with writs, he replies. So does theft, she says. Which do you prefer? He looks over her shoulder, seeing more flags than he expected. What do you want? An oath, she says, and stores. Stores cost, he says. Ask your bishop for a note, she says. He owes me a sermon. It is not quite a joke. It lands like one. They march. It is less a conquering army than a rumour given legs. Bailiffs who hated new taxes fall in. Lords who hate the dispensers more than they love the king send letters. Port reeves balance grain against obedience and choose grain. Within a week, a clerk in a coastal town writes the date in a ledger and adds a line that is almost cheerful. No royal officers rode through today. Within 2, a different clerk notes that prices eased a notch because no one dares hoard when a crowd is reading the scales. Neither man mentions Isabella by name. The outcome speaks loudly enough for the margin. A London merchant meets their column on a road lined with hedges, whose thorns have collected a century of misplaced wool. If you remove dispenser, he says, the city forgives much. Forgiveness is a luxury, Isabella replies. Justice is cheaper to administer. Then promise it, he says. I promise a reckoning, she says, and accounts that add. He laughs once, then bites it back. Add quickly, he says. We intend to. News gallops ahead of them, shed and renewed like breath. Some villages cheer, others blink. English caution is a stubborn crop. The prince speaks when told, learns when to nod, learns faster when to keep silence. He is not a warrior yet. He is a banner on which towns decide to hang hope. A man in a leather jerkin steps out from a hedge. "My brother died for the king," he says. "Mine may die to save the realm." A woman answers before Isabella can. "Choose your sorrow." The man nods once and melts back into green. Breather. For an hour the march sounds like chores. Harness jingles. Somebody sings badly. Bread is passed hand to hand. Even revolutions have to eat. Even queens have to drink water that tastes of sheep. They reach a market square where a stone cross watches deals happen. A preacher climbs his box and measures his words. "Wives, pray," he begins, then stops when he sees who stands near the carts. "Citizens, pray." "For what?" Isabella asks. "For mercy," he says. "Ask for memory," she says. "Ask that you remember who raised your rents and who sold your wool twice." "We remember," an old woman says. "We just forget what to do." "Do this," Isabella tells her. "Tomorrow. Open your shutters. Trade as if the law were in the room." "It isn't," the old woman says. "It will be," Isabella says. "Ride with us, father. Preach that." The preacher blinks, then nods. "I can preach that." By the third week, the numbers begin to harden into the kind of story clerks enjoy. Estimates vary, but some accounts place her force under 2,000 at landing, swollen by sympathizers along the way. Other notes mark that no pitched battle met their march in the first stretch, just towns changing colors and notaries changing adjectives. The crown's writ shrinks to places the dispensers still trust. The king, reports differ on his advice, rides west, taking counsels with him and leaving fear behind to do the rest. "Do we pursue?" Mortimer asks. "We collect," Isabella says. "Oaths, stores, and evidence." "Evidence?" "Of theft in velvet," she says. "I want figures we can read aloud." "Some men prefer swords. Some crimes prefer sums," she replies. They take a castle that changes sides before the ladders reach its wall. They take another, whose garrison discovers that loyalty can be measured in how quickly one hands over keys. Isabella refuses the urge to improvise a triumph. She uses the hours to send letters to London. A city that smells weakness tends to leap if given a safe landing. A rider from the capital gasps news into her tent at dusk. "The people turned," he says. "Shops shut. The dispenser name is a curse." "And the gates?" Mortimer asks. "Almost," the rider says. "By morning." "Almost is a hinge," Mortimer says. "Almost is a risk," Isabella answers. "We move at first light." They move. It's not a sprint, but the kind of rapid step that makes men honest about their boots. Country blurs into road dust. Letters gallop both ways. The prince learns to sign his name without letting the quill tremble. He receives delegations who swear by law, by God, by futures they want unchained from the last 3 years. He learns to listen without looking at his mother for permission. He learns not to apologize for surviving. By the 8th week after the landing, some say sooner, some later, records from frightened days do not always respect calendars. The capital's temper becomes a fact. A bridge is held by men who once held it for the other side. Bells ring without asking bishops. A sheriff's seal appears on a proclamation against the dispensers. A second seal is pressed beside it before the wax cools. No one writes poetry about such moments. Clerks love them anyway. "Mark it down," Isabella tells the notary. "Write what can be counted." "What title do I give you?" he asks. "None," she says. "Titles blur, actions print." He grins. "Printed," he says. "KPI, if anyone insists, landed with a hired corps, under 2,000 by some accounts. and within roughly 8 weeks, major towns declared, London shifted, and not a single formal pitched battle met the first march. Numbers are not drama, but today they are victory. At a campfire that smells of wet wood and roasted certainty, the prince sits beside her and warms his hands. What happens now? He asks. Now, she says, we must turn momentum into law. And father? He asks. Law will decide, she says. We do not. He watches the fire. They have a name for you, he whispers. They always will, she says. Let it work for us. He nods. The flames snap as if agreeing. Morning waits with its lists, councils to summon, writs to restore, a city to steady, a husband to confront without letting vengeance become policy. The next step will require a different courage, how to hold power without letting it hold you. And somewhere already, a darker story forms about a punishment nobody saw. London, late winter. The river dragging grey light past the palace like a slow argument. The council sits with their breath folded, waiting to see if victory can be turned into government. Stakes scrape the floor. If she rules too softly, the old predators return. If she rules by spectacle, she becomes the thing they feared. Between those cliffs, Isabella adjusts her ring and directs the clerks to bring the writs. Name what we restore, she says. The statutes before favoritism ate the treasury, the notary answers. Name what we end. Illegal levies, forced loans, and trials by friends. The prince stands beside her chair, no longer a symbol, not yet a habit. He keeps his shoulders square. He has learned that posture is an oath your spine swears in public. Send for Parliament, she says. Let the city hear its own voice. Which sheriffs carry the summons? Mortimer asks. The ones who survived the last 3 years without stealing, she replies. A chancellor lowers a seal onto warm wax. The writs go tonight. Let them travel faster than rumor, she says. Paper leaves the room in the hands of men who can read and of men who can run. In alleys where prices have learned to climb by themselves, stall-keep gossip calculates whether certainty might finally cost less than fear. Records suggest that within weeks, the Crown's paperwork regained a tempo, oaths taken, forfeitures posted, debts renegotiated instead of invented. Ledgers in 2 markets note prices easing by a few points. It is not redemption, but it is visible, and the visible matters. The old regime is not a ghost. It has names and estates and the kind of loyalty that grows where coin drips often. Isabella moves against it like a surgeon against disease, steady cuts, minimal theatre. Arrest warrants, Mortimer says, laying folded orders on oak. Not all at once, she says. Do not humiliate what we mean to disarm. You don't want spectacle? I want function. Troopers leave at dusk, leather creaking, hooves striking frost. Trials follow. Accounts vary on who argued what behind panels, but records agree on outcomes recorded in the clerk's hand. Confiscations, sentences, and the visible end of the dispenser dominance. She declines to attend the punishments. She prefers minutes to gallows. Mercy wins hearts, a bishop murmurs. Predictability wins markets, she answers. And hearts. They can follow. Breather. For 1 hour, the city sounds almost domestic. Laundry thumps, bells mark the quarter, a boy chases a hoop down Cheapside. Snow threatens, and then forgets. If history pauses anywhere, it is here, breathing through a knitted scarf. By spring, Parliament assembles. Some say the assembly is timid, others say it is relieved. The prince is presented to men who sign their names like they are being forgiven. Isabella remains 1 step behind him, neither shrinking nor swallowing the room. Speak, she tells him quietly. He speaks, and the room does not laugh. That is a beginning. After oaths, the council returns to coin. A goldsmith spreads promissory notes like cards. Interest has been eating meat, he says. Lower it, she replies. You cannot order sentiment, he smiles. Order supply, she says. We escort grain in convoys. Records last winter showed thefts halved when banners led the barges. Aphorism, Mortimer mutters. Add the proof, she says, and the notary does. In the same season, a darker current begins to stain the talk. It concerns a king who is no longer in the room and how he came to that absence. Chroniclers diverge. Later writers embroider. A rumor about a red-hot device slinks into sermons and taverns, eager to convert disgust into memory. Stamp it out, a counsellor urges. Censor it and you harden it, she says. Then deny it, he says. Denying smoke leaves you smelling of it, she answers. We publish facts. What facts do we have? That he is alive under guard, then later not, she says. That custody changed hands, that history is not obliged to choose a lurid sentence when a contested cause will do. She drafts a statement with hedging she has learned to trust. Records suggest, accounts vary, estimates range. It is an ungentle poetry, but it keeps the blood off parchment. Preachers are nudged to measure words. The rumor does not die. It loses appetite. Will they blame you anyway, the prince asks. They will blame someone, she says. The trick is to be the someone who fixes what can be fixed. Fixing looks like numbers. Coin collectors stop inventing arrears. Customs men stop charging twice. Records suggest that over several years, worded that way on purpose, she governs as regent with Mortimer S. shadow on the wall. The shadow lengthens. Even allies ask whether governance is turning into possession. Name limits, she tells herself in the mirror. Name ends. She sells jewels to buy quiet. She sends men to count bridges and barrels. She asks masons how many days it takes to mend a wall instead of asking poets how long a legend lives. Her aphorisms suffer proofs. When escorts ride, pilferage drops. When fares are guaranteed, tax receipts rise. When oaths are heard in public, compliance improves by habit. Outcomes are not theatre, but theatre feeds on them. Your Grace, Mortimer says one night, power likes to sit. It dislikes the idea it must move. Then move it, she says, before it forgets how. He studies her for the length of a candle, inching down. They whisper names for me. They whisper to keep their teeth warm, she says. They whisper that I am king in all but crown. Then help me prove them bored, she says. Let the boy stand beside warrants. Let him speak first and last. Risky, he says. Necessary, she says. The prince signs orders with a hand that no longer shakes. He rides circuits. He hears cases where a miller accuses a reeve, and where a reeve accuses a miller. Justice is small work that accumulates like snow on a branch. If you pretend it is only grand, the branch snaps. The poker story wanders in again from a foreign envoy's lips. We hear it was inventive, he purrs. We hear foreign courts prefer theatre, she replies. A denial, he says. A preference for plain statements, she says. Accounts vary. Records suggest a death in custody, cause contested. Unsatisfying, he says. Useful, she says. He leaves disappointed. She calls that a win. Not all victories are bloodless. Records suggest a dispenser meets a legal end that satisfies many who felt their pockets lightened by policy dressed as loyalty. Isabella does not announce triumph. She signs bills that keep carts moving. The city tests her with small panics. She answers with small repairs. The machine begins to sound like it might run without screaming. Will it hold? The prince asks at a window where the river looks almost patient. Nothing holds by itself, she says. We hold it. For how long? As long as we can make law walk faster than spite. He breathes fog on the glass and writes one word, law. He wipes it before anyone can read. Summer heats the stone. Relief curdles into restlessness. Mortimer's name hardens in mouths that used to taste loyalty when they said it. Isabella sees the arc and keeps the kingdom from bending into a personal circle. She steps back when a proclamation needs only one signature. She steps forward when a hand needs guidance. She reminds herself that regency is a bridge, not an address. Say it aloud, she tells the mirror. A bridge, she says. And after, the mirror asks back in her mind. After, he walks alone, she says. The rumor does what rumors do. It shrinks to a moral for people who prefer a barbed tale to a dull truth. Most historians later will mark the poker story as an exaggeration that survived because it gave fear a shape. She lets them. Her work was never to curate disgust. It was to keep shelves stocked. KPI for those who require one. Regency measured in years rather than months. Writs restored in weeks rather than seasons. Market premiums easing to tolerable rather than predatory. Estimates vary because frightened clerks misdate entries, but the drift is visible and it is away from chaos. At dusk, she walks the gallery with the prince. You taught me to speak, he says. You taught yourself to keep what words build, she answers. What now? Now, she says, we let this city breathe, and we do not mistake breath for permission. Night settles like vellum over ink. Far to the south, a different queen lifts a candle and follows a coffin into the cold. A road turns their necks to Castile, where love, rumour and power share a long vigil. Castile, late autumn 1506. Frost stings the road, and a slow river of candles winds between bare trees. Hooves thud, wheels complain, wool cloaks catch sparks. The stakes ride with the smoke. If she clings to death, she becomes a legend of madness. If she lets go, uncles and fathers claim the crown through her. Between grief and governance walks Joanna, a widow with a spine like iron under mourning black. Keep the pace, the captain says. The lady tires, a maid answers. We all do, he says. Write it down anyway. A clerk scratches in the margin of a leather book. Second watch, 12 miles since dusk. Records suggest these escort notes survive longer than condolences. Your Grace, the chaplain whispers at her stirrup, shall we stop at the next parish? We stop when he breathes easier, Joanna says. Majesty, he swallows. He will not. Then we stop where light is kind, she says. The coffin rides steady in the wagon, ironwork clinking, as if answering a question only metal understands. Rumours will later say she opened it obsessively, that she slept beside it, that she forbade women from approaching the bier out of jealousy. Accounts vary. Tonight there is only winter, the smell of wax, and a queen who refuses to put a period where life has left a comma. Open, she says when they reach the monastery gate. It's not wise, the captain offers. Open, she repeats. The hinges answer. 4 men lift the lid by candlelight. Air moves, less a breath than a permission. Joanna steps forward, hands bare. Majesty, the chaplain pleads, we can pray without this. We do both, she says. Prayer and truth. She looks. The room seems to inhale with her, then hold it. She doesn't weep. She counts, as if numbering fibers on a torn seam. When she speaks, the words carry work rather than wail. Close him, she says, we sing vigil. A novice strikes a tuning note. Voices gather. The hymn is a bridge over water no one can drink. The clerk notes another line. Monastery of San Pedro, 3 hours vigil, 106 candles purchased, 1 cart added. If aphorisms need proof, grief is a tax the living pay. In the ledger it appears as candles and delay. Outcome, the convoy halts long enough that 2 trading carts catch up and fold into its protection. Majesty, a messenger bows, rain hardening on his hair like beads. From the King of Aragon. My father, she says without warmth. Read. His Grace counsels rest, the messenger reads. He advises removal to a safe central residence. He offers guardians who will spare your Grace from burden. Say the name of that residence, Joanna says. Tordesillas, he replies. A wind lifts, nosing the flames. And the burden, she asks. Governance, he says. For now. She nods once, as if filing a contract clause. Write my father, she tells the clerk. Say we proceed at God's pace. Say our safety travels with us. Shall I add a blessing? the chaplain asks. Add numbers, she says. How many men, how many knights? A queen who counts, the captain mutters, not unkindly. A queen who remembers, she answers. Breather. For a span of heartbeats, the monastery becomes only stone, light, breath, and the soft sizzle of a guttering wick. The cold forgets ambition. Even rumour waits outside like a horse tied to a post. At the refectory, bread breaks. Joanna eats without appetite, and then stands to speak to the brothers. Pray for him, she says. Pray for me less. Her voice doesn't rise. It settles, like flour in a jar after a jolt. A young monk, impertinent with sincerity, asks, Why carry him, Majesty? The grave can be holy too. Because men make politics from graves, she says. I will make love from a road. The line could be accused of poetry. She gives it a ledger entry. By week's end, 7 parishes opened way at the first bell. 2 sheriffs provided escorts after markets closed. Outcome, fewer thieves struck the tail carts. The captain reports only 1 knife found where 3 were expected. The convoy moves again. Frost bows the grasses. A mule balks. A boy coaxes it with a slice of apple more persuasive than prayer. Joanna walks beside the wagon for a mile, palm on iron. Majesty, her lady murmurs, you should ride. I will, Joanna says, after he does. People will talk, the lady warns. They already do, Joanna says. Let them discuss distances, not fantasies. Some will still prefer fantasies. Then they are not my people, she answers, but the edge in it cuts only herself. A cluster of townsfolk waits at the next square, heads bare, eyes bright with the awful curiosity sorrow invites. An old woman reaches toward the coffin and stops, feathered by doubt. Touch the wood, Joanna says gently, not the tail. The woman's fingers rest on oak. God keep him, she says. And you, Joanna answers, turning the blessing back like a simple trade. A clerk from the city, starch still new in his collar, arrives with an inventory. Expenses double when we halt for vigil, Majesty, he reports, trying to sound useful rather than afraid. Then we halve something else, she says. Cut pageants, keep escorts. Pageants reassure, he says. Arrivals reassure more, she replies. Show me the sums. He does. Ink is cruel and clarifying. She moves columns with the tip of her fingernail. There, and there, we live without ribbons. At court? He asks. In winter, she says. An envoy from Flanders peers at the candles as if counting proof of rumour. We hear, he says softly, you open the coffin every village. We hear, she answers, foreigners prefer stories to roads. A denial, he asks. A schedule, she says. Records suggest 12 miles tonight. You may print that. He smiles, undeterred, but writes 12. Accounts vary on the most arresting image from this journey. One places her kneeling in a stable, forehead on pine. Another insists she carried a knife. Most say she ordered women kept back. She does none of those tonight. She orders bread sent to a widower with 4 children who stares too hard at the mule team. The clerk notes it because it costs a coin and because it changes a morning. The man will be at his stall instead of at someone else. S. Pocket. The chaplain tries again. Majesty, there is a serenity God gives when we release the body. God is not a porter, she says, and serenity is not governance. Governance can be shared, he whispers. By men who do not bleed for it, she replies. He flinches, then bows. Forgive me, she returns. I am not good company for the living. At midnight, a shower lifts the street dust and presses it into the seams of wool. The candles hiss like cats. Joanna signals halt under an arch where rain falls straight and honest. Open, she says again. The captain does not argue. The lid rises. She does not touch what lies within. She speaks instead into the shadow where a husband used to stand. They will put me somewhere, she says softly. They will call it safety. They will bring keys and reasons. The lady-in-waiting hears only rain, not confession. Majesty, she asks. We go on, Joanna says, and the lid lowers with a mercy the living envy. By dawn, the Clerk's book shows 3 things he will swear to later. Distance, another 12 miles. Expenditure, down after ribbons cut. Incidents, none. It is a small government, this page, but it governs. Grain wagons passed safely. Cellars opened late but opened. A market day salvaged from weather and worry. KPI, if anyone demands a number, 2 extra carts delivered with the convoy. Thefts along the rear reported at 0 for the night. It is math made from candles and stubbornness. Where next? The captain asks. Burgos, she says. Then where the letters insist. Will you go to Tordesillas? Her lady whispers. Letters insist many things, Joanna answers. We'll see what the road agrees to. She mounts at last. The convoy gathers itself, a dragon of light and mud, and begins to move. Behind them the monastery gate swings shut, not as a sentence but as a habit of hinges. Ahead, a hall where counsellors wait with patient pens and practiced phrases like protection and peace of mind. The next chapter is already sharpening its language. By this time tomorrow, men will call it custody. They will tell her it is temporary. Records suggest otherwise. Tordesillas, early spring 1509, rain brushing the tiles like hush. The convoy that began in candlelight reaches a stone palace whose windows watch without blinking. Stakes arrive with the damp. If she yields to protection, she becomes a signature on other people's orders. If she resists, they will name resistance an illness and lock the diagnosis. Between obedience and erasure walks Joanna, cloak heavy, eyes dry from having refused tears for too many nights. Majesty, the warden bows, keys nested in his palm. Keys, she says. How many? 3, he answers. 1 for the crown, 1 for the chaplain, 1 for me. Who holds mine? She asks. He hesitates. We hold it for you. The door breathes open, then shuts with the soft geometry of authority. Iron slides home. A bolt learns her name. Records suggest the exact day of arrival shifts across chronicles. Ledgers agree the pantry began logging deliveries thrice weekly after the first Sunday. Fact travels in weights when words won't cooperate. Her chamber smells of beeswax and stone. A narrow table waits with a prayer book, a jug, a cup. A lady-in-waiting places a folded shawl on the bed and tries to pretend this is a visit. How long? Joanna asks. Until you rest, the lady says. Rest is a tactic, Joanna replies. It becomes policy if you're not careful. Eat first, the lady pleads. Bread after numbers, Joanna says. What do the books say? A clerk presents a ledger with hands that want to tremble but have learned to obey. Rations, deliveries, wages, he says. Appointments for spiritual counsel. Spiritual counsel arrives when coin does, she says. Note that. Majesty, the chaplain ventures from the threshold. His Highness your father sends blessings and wishes you quiet. Quiet for whom? She asks. For you, he says. For Castile. Quiet for Castile is expensive, she says. Quiet for me is a bargain others hope to purchase. He looks at the keys. He looks at the floor. Prayer will help. Prayer helps the one praying, she says. Bring the ink. In a hand steadier than reputation allows, she writes to her father. She does not request permission. She requests schedules, the dates of audience promised, the names of those allowed inside, the number of letters withheld this month. An aphorism visits. Certainty is a door you can lean against. She adds its proof. Last winter, convoy escorts cut thefts by half. Outcome, prices steadied for 2 markets. She underlines the word outcome. The pen digs into fibre. Seal it, she says. The warden clears his throat. We will forward petitions as appropriate. Appropriate to whom, she asks. To your safety, he says. Safety is a room with a lock, she says. Freedom is a key. He bows, trained in the art of outliving conversations. Iron murmurs again at dusk. The first night closes over Tordesillas like a lid. Breather. Morning sifts through the lattice in coins of light. Dust drifts like a slow parade. A sparrow tries the sill and retreats, unconvinced by the view. If serenity visits, it hesitates at the bolt. Days file themselves. She reads aloud to keep the room, answering to her voice. She walks the length of the carpet and back until distance becomes discipline. She asks for inventories and receives them with the ceremony due a queen and the caution due a prisoner. Records suggest visitors included confessors, physicians, and women assigned to kindness. Accounts vary on how often letters left her hands unopened. "Sign this," the chaplain says one noon, laying parchment on the table. "What is it?" she asks. "A guardianship confirmation. For your comfort." "My comfort has never needed witnesses," she says. "It will reassure the realm," he offers. "Wrong verb," she says. "Realms are managed, not reassured." He tries again. "Your father intends only—" "Intentions do not carry keys," she says. The lady in waiting dares a whisper. "Majesty, they fear turmoil." "Then we give them labor," Joanna says, "not theatre." When rumor knocks, she does not open. When grief presses, she negotiates. She builds her day from things that answer back, a psalm, a ledger column, the weather. "Walk," the lady asks. "Count," Joanna says. "Count what?" "Steps," she says. "Today, 500. Why? Because 500 is a thing that can be added tomorrow. By summer, records list the chapel's bread allotments in neat lines. The quarter's 9 parchment pages note no shortages. Outcome, the kitchen never closed early for lack of flour. A small government, this ledger, measured, dull, merciful. Visitors change with the weather and with the rain. The father's portrait is replaced by the son's. Charles arrives years later with the awkwardness of a man who inherited a problem disguised as a parent. "Mother," he says, careful. "Child," she says, not unkind. "They tell me you are not well enough to rule," he says. "They told your grandfather the same," she says. "He found it convenient." "I want stability," he says. "Stability is the word men use for compliance," she says. "Governance is the work." He looks at the keys at his belt as if surprised to find them there. "Will you sign?" "Will you stay?" she asks. "I cannot," he says. "The empire requires—" "Empires always require," she says. "So do mothers." He touches her hand like a man testing silk. "Forgive me," he says. "Be measurable," she answers. Forgiveness is not an audit. He leaves, with the noise of armor making promises to itself. The door learns a new signature in the scrape of its bolt. In 1520, the hallway hears a different drum. Towns rise in Castile, merchants, craftsmen, citizens with lists. The comuneros send envoys to the palace at Tordesillas, names soaked in urgency. "Majesty," an envoy bows, voice quivering with the arrogance of hope. "Speak for us, sign, and your word undoes what we cannot." "Who holds the keys?" she asks. "Men we oppose," he says. "Then you want a queen," she says, "but not the work that made her." "Our towns burn," he says. "Fire eats law first," she says. "If I sign in fire, you will only have flame." He steps closer. "You are the true sovereign." "I am the remembered one," she says. "Memory is not a writ." "Consent?" "Without force around it," she says. "Bring me courts, not crowds." Some chroniclers insist she nearly signed. Others insist she refused outright. Records suggest she withheld her name when the ink would have been a blade. The revolt will recede. Its questions will not. She watches from a window too narrow for anything but looking. Breather. On certain afternoons, the light makes a small theatre of the floor. She stands in it and does nothing noble, just breathes until her ribs loosen. The play ends when a key turns. Years unspool. Accounts vary on her habits. Some paint her a ghost, others a stone. She insists on details that can be counted. 3 deliveries of bread each week. Fresh linen on Sundays. Candles enough for lords and complin. An aphorism returns. Power prefers closed doors. She adds its example, the warden's schedule. 2 guards at dawn, 1 at dusk. Names rotated so duty never becomes compassion. Outcome, no visitor without a ledger line. 46, the lady murmurs one winter morning, hair gone soft with years. What is 46? Joanna asks. Years, the lady says, if we count from that spring. Records suggest 46, Joanna says. Records do not know what a year feels like. Like a door that remembers you, the lady says. Joanna smiles at that. It is small, and it is everything she is willing to give an afternoon. The warden brings a new ledger, crisp, smug. We keep good order, he says. You keep routine, she says. Order is when routine serves justice. Does it? He asks. Not yet, she says. Will you ever leave? He asks, suddenly human. Everyone leaves, she says. Some before the bolt, some after. He bows lower than duty requires. KPI for men who will ask long after the candles gutter, confined, roughly 46 years by the counts that survived, rations logged 3 times a week, petitions forwarded according to someone else's definition of appropriate, signatures withheld when paper asked for fire, estimates range on the days she wept, no ledger records them. At night, she stands with her palm on the panel where the bolt sleeps. This is a door, she says softly. It is not judgment. She refuses to call herself patient or saint or mad or cured. She calls herself present. Presence is an action, not a diagnosis. Majesty, the chaplain says from the hall, older, kinder, or only more tired. Shall I read? Read the psalm about doors, she says. There are several, he smiles. The one where gates lift, she says, even if it's only grammar. He reads. The room listens. Grammar is a poor locksmith. Sometimes it is enough to bang at language until it yields one usable phrase. Far to the northeast, a different door waits to be taught another lesson. It will not be coaxed open by ledgers or psalms. It will be opened by a bird and a spark hidden in cloth, a city learning that wood remembers flame faster than law. Our road turns there next to early Kyiv, where a feast is a hinge and vengeance learns to fly. Kyiv, mid-10th century, the river carrying late snow like ash. The courtyards speak in low iron and leather. If she yields, a tribe that ripped her husband apart will devour the capital next. If she rages without aim, she becomes a story that dies by morning. Between collapse and calculation stands Olga, a widow who counts before she strikes. They sent envoys, the steward says. How many, she asks. 12 today. More wait outside the palisade. They offer peace, she says. They offer marriage, he answers. She studies the brazier as if it were an abacus. Chronicles recount Igor's death at Drevlian hands, torn in a grove thick with tribute and treachery. Accounts vary on the ropes, the trees, the final cry. What does not vary is the message the forest sent. A ruler can be unstitched in a single afternoon if the threads are greed and habit. Bring the first 12, she says. The men enter with faces arranged like gifts. Their leader bows as if the air were delicate. Our prince wishes you dignity, he says. Dignity travels with terms, she answers. He smiles. Terms that will spare your city. Spare it from whom? She asks. From us, he says too quickly. She nods once as if measuring a plank. You are heavy from the road, she says. Rest. Servants will carry you to bath and bed. Hospitality, he says, relieved. Record their names, Olga tells a scribe. All 12. Torches move like slow constellations across the yard. Men climb into a pit disguised as a welcome. Spades work. Soil answers. "What is this?" an envoy whispers as Earth rises to his knees. "A grave," she says. "Chronicles will call it justice. I call it the first line of a letter." "Mercy," he pleads. "You wrote the first sentence in a forest," she says. He opens his mouth to bargain with God. Earth finishes the argument. When the last throat stops trying to climb, she turns and walks back through the cold, like a woman returning from a market where she has purchased a silence. "Send for the second delegation," she says. "Will they fear?" the steward asks. "They will hope the rules are different for them," she says. Hope is obedient. The second party arrives with gifts that glitter like excuses. "We come for reconciliation," their leader announces. "You stink of travel," she says. "Wash." They file into the bathhouse, grateful. Slats sweat. Steam licks the beams. Outside, men wedge timbers and lay brush. "Now," Olga says. Flame learns its work, quiet at first, then confident. Inside, fists hammer walls the way guilt hammers ribs. The fire eats the arguments, then the men. Accounts vary on how long it took. No account argues with the outcome. The yard watches smoke lift. Soldiers study their boots. A boy coughs as if the air itself has decided to remember. "Their prince will send more," the steward says. "Good," she answers. "He will learn the arithmetic." "Arithmetic," he says. "Vengeance without arithmetic is theatre," she says. "With arithmetic it becomes policy." To prove it, she calls for the chest of tribute that failed to arrive last season and has started to rot into metaphors. She opens it, counts the useless coin, and orders it melted into nails. Outcome: by spring, 2 barges and 3 granaries will be mended with metal paid for by arrogance. At dusk, she dictates a message. "Tell the Drevlian prince I accept a funeral feast," she says. "We will honor what the forest unstitched." "Magnanimous," the steward says. "Predictable," she replies. "Write the number of cattle we require. Write the number of cups." "How many?" he asks. "Enough to make drunk the men who call themselves brave." He scratches figures. When he hesitates, she says, "Write 500 guests. Boldness likes a round number." Breath evens. The palace settles. For a moment the city is only hay, frost, and the soft arithmetic of animals sleeping. Even rumor forgets to speak. The river hushes the forges into dreams. At dawn, riders leave with letters tied like warnings to their belts. By the second sunrise, they pass under Drevlian banners to a town that looks like a memory of its own violence. Women peer through shutters. Children count strangers. Men put on pride like a borrowed coat. "We welcome your queen," a voice calls. "She welcomes your provisions," the herald answers. Tables bloom along the square, heavy with meat, horn cups, and the self-confidence of men who prefer wine to recall. Olga arrives at noon in a cloak the color of sober decision. She lifts a cup, drinks as if tasting a map. "Eat," she says. They eat. They try to impress their own legend. A man shouts a joke about forest law. Another tells his version of a rope that never snapped. A third demonstrates how to pull a body apart with teams of men, proving that he has memorized a cruelty like a song. "Another round," Olga says. "Strong queen," a Drevlian captain grins. "Strong thirst." "Strong memory," she answers. The sun tilts. The square collects voices and spills them. She moves among the tables, not touching, only naming what she sees. "This one brags," she says quietly. "That one counts spoils in his head. This one keeps glancing at his knife hand." Each observation finds a place in the ledger she carries behind her eyes. The steward notes nothing. He has learned that the most important column is the one his mistress keeps invisible. "Now," he whispers. "Soon," she says. The captain blinks. The joke under his tongue dies. "You will remarry," he says, "testing tomorrow." "I will make widows," she says, "testing tonight." Fearless, he says. Fed, she replies. He laughs because laughter is what men do when understanding is a cliff, and they have already stepped. Midway through the feast, she tells a story. Once there was a city that forgot what debt looks like, she says. It thought debt was a number. Debt is a map. It tells you who arrives armed and why. That's a sermon, a man jeers. Then here is the proof, she says, and lifts her hand. Kina's move like words that have finally been allowed off the page. Arrows appear from roofs where hospitality stored them. Knives finish what arrows begin. Some men fall with their mouths open, surprised to discover that conversation has a blade. Some try to stand and find that their legs prefer to retire. A drummer keeps time without meaning to. His head meets a table and keeps time anyway. Count, Olga tells the steward over the animal noise. He counts in 10s and 20s because 10s and 20s are how chaos can be converted into a sentence. Chronicles recount roughly 5,000 dead by night's end. Estimates vary because sober counting is rarely invited to these tables. What does not vary is that morning will find a square emptied of boasting and a city remembering a new shape for its spine. A boy crawls under a bench and looks up at her through a lattice of shadows. Mercy, he whispers. You live, she says. That is its name. She signals her men to move the bodies to one side and the tables to another. Do not trample the bread, she says. Waste is the brother of arrogance. Later, when the village tells this night to itself, it will include the small correction about bread. The aphorism will live because it left a scar you can see, 3 sacks saved, which fed the old and the tired the next day. Outcome? Fewer thefts at the edge of dawn, where hunger and fear usually trade knives. She orders a grave for the captain, who could not finish his joke. Not honor, she says. Order. Will they submit now? The steward asks. They will calculate, she says. It amounts to the same thing. Chronicles will say you were merciless, he warns. Chronicles like adjectives, she says. I prefer totals. Night hardens, then cools, the square empties of the living, her riders saddle quietly. The men who remain breathing will wake into a world with fewer certainties and more timetables. Tribute will arrive on the date she writes, not the date habit prefers. That is a law even enemies can be taught. The steward looks north. He will hear, he says, the prince. He will listen, she says, and then he will fortify. And then he will hide behind walls and wood, she says, watching the roofs where smoke has thinned to a question. And I will ask the sky to help me answer. Iskarostan, late summer, the air dry enough to remember sparks. The Drevlian capital sits in a bowl of hills, roofs thatch thick, eaves packed with nests. Stakes stand where the wind can see them. If she assaults the walls, losses bleed her claim. If she waits, tribute thins into mockery. If she gambles and fails, the legend of her arithmetic collapses. Olga studies the roofs as if they were an abacus. How many thatched houses, she asks. Most of them, the steward says. How many nests beneath the eaves? More than we can count. Then we count fires, she says. Chronicles recount that she demanded a peculiar tribute, pigeons and sparrows from every household. Accounts vary on the number, but the point is shape, not sums. Birds remember home with a stubbornness that makes poets sentimental and generals practical. Send word, she says. 1 bird from each house. They will laugh, the captain mutters. They will pay, she answers. Laughter is cheaper. A courier rides under a rag of truce. The Drevlian prince sends back an answer so polished it slides. Birds you shall have, the letter declares, to show we desire peace. The man who pens it imagines peace as a blanket. Olga thinks of peace as a schedule. Collect them, she says. Cages arrive, fluster and feather. Children look worried and try to look brave. Soldiers line the baskets along the ditch and wait for instruction, hands twitching because hands prefer swords to string. What do we tie? A young archer asks. Cloth, the steward says. What kind of cloth? The archer insists. The kind that remembers flame, Olga replies. Bring sulphur, bring pitch, make knots that do not admire themselves. Chronicles differ on the recipe. Some say rag soaked in sulphur, others strips smeared with resin and a whisper of oil. Records suggest only that the cords were light and the knots were sure. The work smells like shipyards and sermons about caution. Men who laughed at the order grow quiet when they see the bundles. Light and smoulder, she says, not blaze. Why not blaze? The captain asks. Because we are not aiming at sky, she says. We are aiming at nests. Breather. For a count of 20, the camp falls almost gentle. The river forgets to hurry. An ox snorts and shakes off a fly. Even those who love steel admit that the greatest edge in war is sometimes patience. They move down the line, matching small fires to small lives that want only to go home. A bird squirms. A soldier steadies it without cruelty. Another bird blinks, as if understanding has tapped its shoulder. Smoke learns a thin language. Release on my word, Olga says. The steward wets his lips. How many at once? Enough to make counting hard, she says. Then more. Now? The captain asks. Now, she says. Hands open. Feather and flame rush upward, then curve. Home is a compass lodged behind the eye. The sky writes quick grey question marks, then lowers them onto thatch. At first there is nothing but a suggestion, then a flicker, then 10, then 50. A woman on a wall laughs at the foolish attack and stops when she smells her own eaves thinking. Count the columns, Olga says. 7, the steward answers, squinting. 9, 12. Count again. 15, he says. 20, Majesty. Good, she says. Fire is a fast clerk. Proof follows the aphorism. Thatch curls, rafters confess. Smoke becomes a signal none can ignore. Outcomes multiply where orders once stalled. Men run not to kill, but to carry. Ladders go up where ladders had never been loved. The garrison learns that saving a town one roof at a time is a kind of defeat that burns the hands. Gates, never mind their boasting, are useless when walls burn from the top down. Shields, the captain shouts, advance under smoke. Not yet, Olga says. Why wait? Because fear must ripen, she says. Half-ripe fear fights. Inside the city, a bell falters, then claps true. A boy tosses a bucket that falls short. A woman beats at a spar with a broom and discovers what wood thinks of brooms. The Drevlian prince orders men to the wall and hears only the noise of roofs remembering fire. He looks east and sees a line of shields kneeling in the haze. Now, Olga says, they go forward under the grey, an army that learned its timing from kitchens and kilns. Arrows come late and aimless. Smoke drifts, then leans. The wind chooses a side without ceremony. By the time they reach the outer works, men inside have stopped pretending they control where embers choose to rest. Parley, someone calls, voice coughing. Terms, Olga replies. Water first, the voice begs. Terms, she repeats. Safe conduct, he tries. For whom, she asks. Women, children, he says. The priest. Yes, she says. Open. The gates do what iron does when hands forget why they shut it. Her men enter, not as butchers, but as a bureaucracy that brought swords. She repeats the rules that make even vengeance resemble policy. Do not trample bread, she says. Do not burn stores. Mark houses that surrendered their birds on the first call. That last rule, the captain says. Why? Because obedience remembers dates, she says. We pay attention in both directions. A Drevlian officer stumbles forward and kneels because the floor has opinions. Mercy, he says. Ledgers first, she answers. Ledgers? He blinks. How many households, she asks. How much tribute? Which roads you tax? Speak in numbers. He does, tripping. The steward writes, verifying against last year's lies. In a corner of the square, soldiers pull buckets in a line. Somebody's aunt corrects their rhythm and makes it work twice as well. Mercy looks like water when it is busy. At sunset, the big fires have become opinions. The little ones sulk and die. Olga walks the lanes that remain lanes and marks the ones that became cautions. This street, she says, repaired before winter. That granary, she says, count sacks, then seal. She takes a courtyard where a sparrow, its string burned down to a lesson, pecks the ground, as if proving that loss and appetite still share a vocabulary. You will rule us, a woman asks, not deferent, not daring, only tired. I will collect what is owed on the day it is owed, Olga says. And if there is no grain, the woman asks, then I collect in work, she says, bridges built, fords dredged. The woman nods. Work keeps hands from thinking. Work teaches them better thoughts, Olga replies. The Drevlian prince is found with ash on his tongue. Accounts vary on whether he knelt or refused. Records suggest only that afterward, oaths were taken where boasts had stood. If justice is theatre, this was a play written in columns, households registered, weights standardized, tribute shifted from rumour to calendar. By the third market day, convoys moved under escort. Pilferage along the West Road fell by roughly half. By the first snowfall, 3 outer forts were repaired, 2 ferry points dredged, and a new granary roofed with shingles instead of straw. The city will tell itself that the birds taught that lesson. The ledger will insist carpenters did. Write the schedule, Olga says. First of each month, the steward says. Stagger the far villages, she adds. Distance is a cost, he writes. The quill scratches like flint on dry wood and makes a different kind of fire. A foreign envoy watches her sign the last page. Chronicles will call you ruthless, he says. They can, she answers. Ruthlessness is a poor word for arithmetic. What word then, he asks. Order, she says. Order punishes, he says. Order remembers, she says. Punishment is only a proof. He bows because he cannot argue with a city that breathes more evenly by dusk than it did at dawn. KPI for whoever will weigh stories against receipts. A siege ended without ladders breaking, tribute collection regularized to monthly oaths, 3 forts rebuilt before winter, pilferage down by near half on a road whose name had become a warning. Estimates range for casualties, chronicles prefer the larger number. What they agree on is that smoke writes policy faster than ink, if someone teaches it the letters. Night smooths the edges of the roofs that survived. Birds settle elsewhere, wiser or only tired. Olga stands where the square remembers noise and lets quiet replace it, a currency she intends to spend carefully. She will convert vengeance into law until the realm prefers law to fear. Far to the southwest, and 5 centuries later, another city trades in whispers instead of smoke. Rome learns to sell rumor as spectacle, and a young woman named Lucrezia will be asked to wear a poison ring she never ordered. Our road turns there next, to a table where gossip eats before truth finds a chair. Rome, late 1490s. Lanterns bleeding light into alleys that prefer secrets. The Tiber breathes damp through papal stone. Stakes settle in the smoky air. If she becomes the girl with the poison ring, every alliance signed in her name curdles. If she is only rumor, the family's power thins into a punchline. Between catastrophe and caricature walks Lucrezia. Sleeves immaculate, gaze unhurried, reputation already arriving before she does. Is it true? A clerk whispers behind a pillar. Which truth? A goldsmith asks. The ring, the clerk says. The one that kisses men to sleep. Rings kiss no one, the goldsmith mutters. People do. A printer locks type into a form, letters like teeth. He sets a pasquinade for dawn. Clever, poisonous, cheap. He cranks the press once, twice. Ink turns an insult into 100 mouths. Make it rhyme, a student urges. It already does, the printer says. So does coin. Rumor sprints, records limp. Proof. By sunset, 3 streets recite a new couplet about her. By week's end, the printer's ledger shows 400 sheets sold. Outcome: the slander funds its own reprint. Lucrezia crosses a gallery as if gliding across a ledger line. A painter bows and lifts his brush. Cardinals watch from a distance that reads as discretion and counts as appetite. "Hold still," the painter begs. "I am still," she says. "Your eyes move," he says. "They prefer the living," she replies. A diplomat from Venice arranges his face into neutrality and fails. "Madonna," he murmurs, "Rome admires you." "Rome admires novelty," she says. "It changes tastes every Lent." "Your ring," he tries, smiling. "May I see?" She offers her hand. Gold, plain, sober. The myth refuses to sit on it. "This one?" he asks, disappointed. "This one," she says, "for letters, for seals, for hands I choose." "Then the other is legend," he presses. "Accounts vary," she says. "Your dispatches will too." At dinner, gossip eats before soup arrives. A friar describes a banquet that may never have happened. A cousin of a cousin remembers a locked room no one entered. A soldier repeats what a servant's aunt's neighbor swore she saw. The story grows like ivy, fast, indiscriminate, charming until it strangles. "Why not deny it?" a lady hisses. "Denying smoke perfumes your clothes," a secretary whispers back. "Then ignore it," she says. "Smoke burns the house you ignore," he answers. Lucrezia lifts her spoon and doesn't spill. She measures the room like a merchant, not a martyr. Her father rules by a crown that sits over a keyhole. Her brother rules by fear that calls itself efficiency. She must rule by remembering what the house actually sells. Marriages, truces, time. "Walk with me," she tells a steward. They pass tapestries that brag about old hunts. In a lower hall, a courier kneels and offers a letter sealed in broken blue. "From Ferrara," the steward says. "Terms?" she asks. "A match," he says. "A house with coffers and a city with craftsmen." "Price?" she says. "Dower and peace," he says. "Numbers in the margin." She reads. Figures glitter without light. Dowry estimates, freight lists, the names of organ builders and armourers, a hint about a canal project that needs grace more than money. Records suggest later that the marriage to Ferrara did happen. Accounts vary on when the invitation truly arrived. What does not vary is that tonight Lucrezia learns the number that measures a different future. "Answer?" the steward asks. "Not yet," she says. "Rumour must spend itself first." "Why wait?" he asks. "Because buyers pay more when they're done laughing," she says. Breather. For an hour the palace sounds like linen, plates and practice footsteps. The city outside clicks like a loom. The night becomes domestic, a rare and useful costume for Rome. In a jeweller's back room, apprentices warm a tiny crucible. A customer demands a ring with a cavity. The jeweller frowns. "For poison?" he asks. "For perfume," the man says too quickly. "Perfume is cheap," the jeweller replies. "Fear costs extra." He sells the ring anyway. Commerce is a realist, and writes the sale in a book that never lies. KPI for the week: 2 rings with hidden spaces. 15 pamphlets purchased by a noble house for private amusement. 3 painters paid to sketch a face everyone already knows. Outcome: the market for insinuation thrives. The woman being sold refuses to buy. "Madonna," the painter asks during the next sitting, "how do you want history to see you?" "Legible," she says. "As what?" he asks. "As work," she says. He blinks. "Not beauty." "Beauty is a rumour with a mirror," she says. "Work survives the mirror." A cousin leans in, velvet sighing like a secret. "They say you loved 2 men at once." "They say many things," she says. "Is it true?" he says. "Records suggest my heart is less interesting than my dowries," she replies. "So it is true," he grins. "It is convenient," she says. At Vespers, a Venetian envoy rehearses his report. "Her manner is composed," he writes, "her influence considerable." He adds a line that smiles with its teeth. Stories persist regarding intimate improprieties. The letter will take 10 days to travel and 1 hour to be believed. Why do they need you wicked? A maid asks as she pins fabric. Wicked explains outcomes, Lucrezia says. Men prefer a woman's vice to their own math. Which math? The maid asks. The math that pays soldiers, Lucrezia says. The math that closes loans. Can vice do that? The maid asks. Vice can sell papers, she says. Math fixes ships. In the Vatican gardens, she counts the steps of a shaded walk. A cat sins against stillness and stares. 2 boys scrap in gravel until a guard coughs them apart. She writes a note to herself because notes are how she steadies the world. Rumor is a coin. Spend it when it buys you time. Refuse it when it charges interest. Proof. Last month, delay on the Ferrara decision lifted the offer by a modest clause. 2 debts forgiven, 1 promise clarified. Outcome. Better freight rights if she ever needs to move a household by river. Some call you a courtesan, a French singer says that evening, stripping his lute of dignity 1 chord at a time. Some call you a singer, she says. He laughs. I sing for coin. I live with it, she replies. Which is worse? He asks. Depends on your ledger, she says. A scribe appears with a parchment like a puzzled face. Madonna, there's a thing. Say it, she says. A list, he says. Names of men who claim you. Burn it, she says. Truly, he asks. Make ash, she says. Use it to ink the reply to Ferrara. What do we reply, he asks. We ask for time and detail, she says. Dates of delivery, names of dowry witnesses. Not poetry, he smiles. Poetry doesn't move furniture, she answers. A bishop sidles into the corridor as if absolution were a physical object. Child, he says, penitence is a path. So is policy, she says. Policy ends, he warns. Penitence does too, she answers. Usually at supper. He sighs the way men sigh when ideas don't kneel. At least remove that ring, he says. This ring seals letters, she says. It offends only wax. In alleys, boys chalk a jest on a wall, then learn a new rhyme by heart. In salons, men discuss a woman they have never met and decide what she must be. In bedchambers, lovers try on poison like a story and wake to ordinary headaches. Does it tire you? The painter asks on the final sitting. Being invented, she says. Yes, he says. It bores me, she says. Boredom is useful. It keeps the hand steady. He signs his name small and neat. The portrait shows a woman without accusation, which is itself a kind of accusation in Rome. By winter, the numbers begin to grow bones. Records suggest 3 marriages will bracket the legend. Accounts vary on motives and those who profited most. Measurable. 1 union annulled by law. 1 husband dead by violence not fully explained. 1 proposal from Ferrara increasingly likely, with terms stiffening like starch. Outcome tonight. The jewelers sell 2 more perfume rings to men who hope stories come true. The printers print. The papal kitchens feed a table that pretends to be a court. In her room, Lucrezia holds a piece of paper up to a candle until the fibers show their map. She does not dramatize, she edits. She crosses out a word that flatters and writes one that builds. She folds, seals, and stamps with the ring no song will ever make famous. Will they ever stop talking? The maid asks. No, Lucrezia says, but they may change what they say. How? The maid asks. By giving them a new job, she says. Let them count. Count what? The maid asks. Brides, Lucrezia says, contracts, ships, results. Rome exhale, wine, gossip, incense. The night closes its fist and then opens it again, as if negotiating with itself. Somewhere in the city a fresh satire dries on a line. Somewhere in Ferrara a clerk lists what must be ready for a duchess who is not yet a duchess. Her answer to the invitation goes out at first light, folded as clean as a blade. A different city waits with a different kind of arithmetic, where workshops drown out whispers and ledgers learn her signature by heart. Ferrara, early spring, the city walls stitched with swallows and fresh banners. The gate opens not like a threat, but like a welcome measured in inches. If she fails here, Rome's jokes cross the Po and colonize her name. If she succeeds, rumor pays rent to reality. Between exile and authorship walks Lucrezia, cloak travel-stained, hands steady enough to sign a future. "Announce me plainly," she says. "As what?" the steward asks. "As work," she answers. The crier chooses the older style because old words spend well. The Duke's bride, the city's peace, the accounts that must be reconciled. She enters under arches that prefer craftsmen to courtiers. Records suggest the marriage sealed an armistice of interests. Accounts vary on who wanted which clause more. What does not vary is that Ferrara counts. "Ledgers," she says before the flowers. A clerk hustles, ink on his thumb like a bruise. "Debts, stipends, arrears," he says. "Workshops awaiting payment." "How many?" she asks. "8 overdue," he says. 3 critical. "Names," she says. He reads them. She repeats each back until it fits in her mouth like a responsibility. "Show me the shops," she says. They walk. A bellows heaves like a lung. An organ pipe shines like a sermon. A loom hums as if a spider became a guild. "Your Grace," an organ builder bows. "Our invoice sleeps." "Wake it," she says. "Deliver by Corpus Christi, payment at Vespers." "Vespers the same day?" He blinks. "Work that sings should not wait for morning," she says. "An aphorism," the steward murmurs. "Add its proof," she replies. "Mark the debt cleared when the organ sounds. By week's end, an entry appears. Organ delivered, payment made at Vespers." Outcome: the builder takes on 2 apprentices he had dismissed. The chapel stops using a cracked reed that made saints sound uncertain. She walks the market on a Tuesday when real cities show their teeth. A pork seller argues with arithmetic. A weaver smiles with all the serenity of a man paid. A bookseller lays out sheets still thirsty for more sun. "What sells?" she asks. "Lives of saints," he says. "Satire." "Always satire," she smiles. "Commission a pamphlet that lists honest weights." "Boring," he says. "Useful," she answers. "Hang it by the scales." "Will anyone read?" "They will when fines arrive," she says. Breather. Afternoon thins into gold. Pigeons edit the sky. For 3 streets, nothing happens but commerce, performing its modest magic. Hands meeting in prices that do not tremble. In the palace, an accountant arranges promissory notes into 2 piles, hope and habit. "Interest eats meat," he complains. "Lower it," she says. "Your Grace cannot order appetite," he says. "Order escorts," she counters. When barges are guarded, hoarding drops. Records suggest theft fell by half during last winter's convoys. "Which half?" he demands. "The half that made widows," she says. "Lower the premium on escorted goods by 2 points. Publish the schedule." He hesitates exactly long enough to be forgiven. "Published," he says. KPI, if anyone requires a number this early. By the 2nd market cycle, gouging complaints in 2 parishes drop by roughly 1/3. Escorted grain sells at the posted rate instead of the whispered one. The figure isn't a miracle. It is a door stopping a draft. A painter arrives to flatter or record. It is hard to tell in a town that understands both verbs. "Sit," he pleads. "For a little," she says. He lifts his brush. "Smile?" "No," she says. "Why not?" "Because I am not selling teeth," she says. "I am selling time." A monk from a nearby house bows so low it qualifies as geology. "Whispers follow you," he says. "They followed me here," she answers. "They can learn the streets." "Deny them," he suggests. "Denying smoke perfumes your sleeves," she says. "Replace it." "With what?" "Receipts," she says. "Receipts are hinges." She tests the hinge in person. At a granary, she signs a narrow order, sacks tallied to the 10th, seals inspected by a man who owes no one dinner. An aphorism arrives. Generosity without lists is gossip with a halo. She adds its proof. Distribution by token cuts, quarrels at the door. Outcome: a brawl that starts usually by the 3rd cart does not start at all. The Duke watches from the courtesy of a shadow. "They like you," he says. "They like certainty," she answers. "Certainty is expensive," he warns. "So is panic," she says. He smiles as men smile when they choose to agree with results. "Festival?" he offers. "We can afford joy." "We can rent it," she says, "but let it serve a purpose." "Which?" he asks. "Unveil the organ, post the wait list, swear new oaths with music." "Music persuades?" He laughs. "People listen when listening is already instructed," she says. The night of the feast arrives with lanterns and practical miracles, benches that do not collapse, bread that keeps its shape when sliced. The organ breathes, sound climbs, sure-footed. A boy near the back cries because he recognizes beauty without having been told its name. A pamphlet flutters above the scale like a flag that prefers decimals. A market inspector fines a man for shaving the pound. No one riots. That is governance disguised as song. "Your ring," an older matron murmurs at the edge of the crowd. "Is it the one?" "This one seals contracts," Lucrezia says. "It offends only wax." "Then the other?" the matron presses. "Legends travel faster than horses," Lucrezia says. "Records arrive with baggage." The matron laughs like someone who has paid both rumor and rent. "Keep delivering baggage," she says. News tries to keep up. A Roman envoy wrinkles a dispatch around his dislike. "She conducts herself like an intendant," he writes. He adds the ritual poison. Whispers regarding intimate improprieties persist, and seals it with a flourish that looks like conscience. The letter will cross the Apennines in rain. In Ferrara, the canal crew begins digging where the contract says the shovel should bite. "River work," the steward reports. "We need timber." "How much?" she asks. "Enough to cross a winter," he says. "Names," she says again. He recites carpenters, carters, and a miller who trust coin more than saints. She signs the allotment and writes a second line men will quote because they like the taste of it. Bridges are promises in wood. She adds the proof. A flooded road is passable 2 days sooner than last season. Outcome: 2 caravans that would have camped and stolen instead arrive and sell. Women come with questions that have figures attached. How many loaves can be set aside without punishing markets? How many dowry chests qualify for a levy waiver in plague weeks? She answers with thresholds and dates, then visits the room where the chests are stacked because answers learn manners when you walk among them. Her influence considerable. She refuses 3 petitions that ask for mercy disguised as habit. "Not this month," she says. "Show me work." "Work?" A petitioner frowns. "Bridges, washing stations, clean drains," she says. "Mercy is a wage when it buys hours." A poet writes a sonnet anyway. He hangs it on a nail near the fishmonger's. It survives 2 rains and a scoff. On the 3rd day, a child copies a line because the cadence pleases him. Perhaps that too is a kind of policy. When the Ferrara court jokes about Rome, it prefers a gentle knife. "How is your poison ring?" a cousin asks at supper. "Empty," she says. "Empty of what?" He grins. "Patience," she replies, and signs the last receipt of the quarter, while the table laughs. The steward posts the tally. Stipends current in 7 guilds, 3 workshop arrears cleared, grain premiums down 2 points on escorted runs, 1 canal crew ahead of schedule by 4 days, festival funded by a rebalanced import duty rather than arms. If memory needs a hinge, this is one that turns. At dusk, she walks to the city gate with only 2 attendants. The porter nods and reaches for the bar. "Leave it," she says. "Open," he asks, startled. "Tonight," she says. "The road needs to see we mean trade." Is it safe? He asks. Safer than fear, she answers. He hesitates, then steps back. The wood lifts. The arch breathes. The gate, last time a trap, then a bolt, becomes a mouth that feeds the city. Doors were weapons, doors were sentences. Tonight, a door is policy. Will they ever stop talking? The maid asks at her shoulder. No, Lucrezia says, and the street takes the word and shrugs, but they will change the subject. To what? The maid asks. To what we built, she answers. Behind her, the organ carries a final chord through stone. In front of her, carts creak with goods that are more obedient than rumors. The hinge of the city swings toward morning, and if anyone still insists on the girl with the poison ring, they must now argue with weights, with music, with bridges, and with an open gate that forgot how to fear.